Well, good morning, everybody. So here we are on Thursday morning, and we're stitching together the pieces of the next several low-pressure systems that are coming across the United States. And we're starting off with some radar data at the beginning here. We have this stationary boundary that's tucked right in through here that has some good warm air advection on its southern side, but plenty of cold air on the northern side to support the snow that moved through this region. We have the low that's trying to get out of Arizona and New Mexico, spreading some rain into Texas yesterday, into parts of Oklahoma as well. And this is going to become a low that'll move across the south, into the southeast, and eventually join up with the kind of the flow that you see here to create a decent system rolling up the East Coast here for the next few days. Speaking of the East Coast, we've once again had another day of convective snow showers in through this region, some lake enhancement as well. And the big event's still coming into the West Coast right now. So a lot to kind of just keep our eye on in this video. So let's take a look at the last 72 hours of snow. And remember, this goes through last night at 7 p.m. So we're not really capturing what did come through this area in the overnight hours. But this is our current snow stripe right in through here. A little bit of snow this morning still falling in this area. This was from the upper level low over the last couple of days, which we've been talking about now for well over a week. That's part of that, what was once the omega blocking pattern. And take a look at the snow in the interior of New England. This is an area that we've kind of been just monitoring for these snow showers, knowing there's cold enough air in this region. But some places have picked up just persistent snow day after day. But the reality of it is it's not been enough to offset what you've got on this map. That's our season-to-date departure from normal snowfall map. And what I'm talking about here is just the lack of, consistent cold air enhancing the lake effect snow machine and hitting these regions. So it's just a great map to kind of track throughout the season. Now, we've been talking about the system that's starting out later this week and into the weekend, and then more coming, another one before Easter, one probably on Easter, that has the chance for adding a lot of snow into an area that's in serious deficit. And that's going to be the topic. We're going to have to cover a lot today. So here we go. This is the flow right now. This is in the low levels of the atmosphere. There's the little warm boundary, a little stationary front that sits right in through here. It's rather weak, but it's persistent in its placement. Here's the deeper low that left that gave us some of the snow on the backside, and here's kind of where the action is going to be coming from soon. If we just step this up in the atmosphere to jet stream level winds, this is the end of that little trough that's been sitting over Arizona for so many days, and it's about to get pulled out here across the south, linking up with this one here, and the two together are going to produce a system in the east. But it will be the low that you see sitting just off the Pacific Northwest that dives into the southern United States and gets just pulled through the country. And what follows it across the Pacific is more. There's just more of these lows making their way through. So this morning, about 5:40 this morning, we have the winter storm watches, winter storm warnings here throughout parts of the Northeast. We then have this long stretch into here of winter weather advisories with a winter storm watch right here in this part of Montana. We're going to see a lot of heavy snow in the next 10 plus days that will start in the western mountains, moving through the Rockies, and then really overtaking a large section here, the upper Midwest and northern plains. But there is now some better detail on where I think the snow could be, the heaviest snow bands could be. The models, I think, have come into a bit better sync, so we need to talk about that rather than just giving you these big blanket maps that show lots of snow everywhere. Okay, so I figured we'd just start off with the high-resolution models and then kind of work our way up to the longer term. If we just start this off at 7 a.m., let's play together these first couple of systems. So see the rain coming out of the Red River Valley of the South in eastern Texas, the snow spreading along that boundary we just mentioned here. And then this is going to move over the Delta tonight into tomorrow morning. And then we're going to watch some decently heavy snows moving through parts of the upper Midwest and Great Lakes. And I think one of the areas that'll be important to watch very carefully is going to be this northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin region into lower Michigan for the heaviest snows out of this. To the south, some of these storms will be rather strong, but what will happen is by the time we get to Friday afternoon, which is here, getting into Friday evening, remember these first two parts of the flow kind of combine and roll up the coast. So this is now midnight or 12 a.m. on Saturday morning, and throughout the morning on Saturday through midday, system number one kind of rolls through the whole of the eastern U.S., and we're going to take a look at the snowfall of this in just a few seconds. Now we get into reset mode, and we're going to watch the next low come through. Now, something to think about here, because that system rolls through and changes the direction of the flow, we don't have an immediate return of moisture well ahead of the next deep low. We talked about this bit yesterday. And that is critical for understanding the severe weather threat. One, the destabilization of the atmosphere, primarily with that. And then two, how does the moisture recover after this? Now, in my video, I'm just going to get into the result and show you what the models are doing rather than go through all of the moisture maps, but you'll see what I mean here in just a few seconds. But first, let's get a little look at that snow. And I'm going to go ahead and use the high-res NAM to kind of get an idea on it. And I don't often use the NAM for snow, but I do think that it's got a pretty good handle on this. So this stripe right in through here, coming through, let's get the timing on that again. So this will be 1 a.m. Friday morning, playing through, 1 a.m. on Saturday morning, right into that area. There's the potential for grabbing a quick, could be 4 to 6 inches of snow in a narrow band in this area before it moves into New England. Now after that, all the attention is going to go back to the west. And so this particular animation goes out 60 hours. Let's step it up just a little bit by going to the WPC probability maps, which go out 72 hours. That means this gets us to early morning on Sunday. The first map here shows you the probability of 2 inches. Let's go ahead and step it up to the chance of getting 4. So again, you see that little stripe into there that's got, better than probably an 80% chance of 4 inches. Of course, we're much heavier snows here in this part of New England. And then here's the next event. If we step it up to 8, we can now see that already just through Sunday, the probabilities are beginning to increase right in through this corridor of getting some really heavy snow. I mentioned a few moments ago that we're starting to now see some of the nuances of this system. And one of those areas that I think probably saw bigger snows in the forecast early that are starting to see them drop off might be this section of the Red River Valley. Because what we're now getting is better information on the inflection of this next low. In other words, when it makes that turn to go from positively tilted, which means the trough is like this, to negatively tilted. And it appears that it's going to hit this area much harder into parts of Minnesota coming out of South Dakota, maybe clipping northern Iowa, then into Wisconsin with the snow rather than the Red River Valley of the north. But that's the probability of 8 inches just through Sunday. And we're still going to be watching so much more activity after that. Now, there is a severe aspect to this storm system and the ones that follow. And the Storm Prediction Center has given us some more extended information about that. So here's today's risk, so primarily down here right along the Texas coast. As we get into tomorrow, we've got just a broader area of thunderstorm activity across the Gulf Coast into Florida. But by day 3, so day 3 again this is Saturday essentially, we're watching that next system start to emerge. And this is where the Storm Prediction Center started to change their day 4 outlook, which is kind of striped right into this part of Texas into Kansas, and day 5 over the Delta. And I bring this up because we talked earlier in this week about how this system is moving across the country and its ability to return moisture back into parts of western Texas and the panhandles and eastern Colorado. I've been concerned about this area, given the overall momentum of the atmosphere kind of getting missed with a lot of the precipitation coming up. And we're, again, seeing that dry line move out farther and farther away from like the Cap Rock and, this region, which is just an area that I'm worried about because of the longer range, right? We've seen the drought kind of focus itself in the models in this area. But anyways, this would be, again, Sunday, and let's go out there again to day 5. This would be in Monday. So Sunday and Monday, the risk areas for severe storms. All right, it all boils down to understanding the upper level flow. So let's get into it. First of all, that is the end of our blocking omega pattern we've been in. And as we play this forward, this is the one that's going to link up with the trough that's here over Ontario. And the two of these by this weekend roll up the East Coast, and they're going to produce all that moisture you saw going up the East Coast. By the time we get into, let's get Sunday morning through Monday morning, here's our much broader trough that's sneaking through the midsection of the country. And again, what I mentioned here was the inflection. So you start off with the trough looking like this, in other words, a north-south orientation. And by the time we get into Tuesday, it's got this orientation that's more negatively tilted. So the speed at which this swings around and where it produces its heavy snow is largely dependent on the trough axis. Now, really quickly, if you remember, I know it was a while ago, but it's like 13 days ago, We use the artificial intelligence forecasting system to identify this first because it was a bit washed out in the ensemble, which is what you're looking at here. But it almost had, the timing was a little different, but it almost had that same kind of shift in the inflection of this trough as to what we're seeing now, which means, remember we said, let's put this thing to the test. Its first test, A+. I mean, absolutely nailed this thing in terms of its position and strength. So that's it. That's the big one that's coming through. Now, what I want you to see is what happens afterward. Part of that trough goes all the way to the Hudson Bay, but there's a southern part of it that breaks off as well, another shortwave that hits this region. Part of the reason why the south and southeast, starting in eastern Texas, going all the way to the Carolinas, is set up for multiple rounds of very, very heavy rain. But this is Thursday, March 28th. And by the time you get out to Friday, the 29th, we have another trough that ejects in the southern plains. This is another chance for snow north, heavy rain east, and severe storms south. That one rolls through, gets over to the Ohio Valley. Then on Easter Sunday, which is right here, that Sunday morning, another deep trough of low pressure. All of these loaded up in the Pacific right now. Comes into California, Nevada, Arizona, and you'll notice it sweeps out and is sitting somewhere here in the southern plains as well. Now, since I just gave high praise to the European artificial intelligence, let's go have a look at it. And it's got something in there as well. A much deeper trough extending into, Minnesota is where it's anchored here. At that time, this is April 2nd. But we've got multiple chances of repeat storm systems is the main idea here, all the way through probably April 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And that's how far out the models go. They're 15-day runs. So we'll keep an eye on what happens after that. But that gets you through 5 days of April. And it's going to be a very, very active go of it. So let's use that artificial intelligence forecast. I'm only going to take it out 10 days. But this is its 10-day forecast of total precip. And as you can see, they start in the west. They eject out of the Rocky Mountains. And they pull moisture from the Gulf. Just very characteristic lows. What's critical about this is this and this. These are the areas that are being missed overall in the flow. And the issue here is that the Canadian prairie has been dry, seasonally dry for several months. In fact, I'm thinking back, it's been a couple of years since we've been off the drought monitor in the Canadian prairie. And I've had a lot of concern about this whole side of Texas and what it means to get such strong flow with quickly ejecting troughs. It just seems like the dry line's pushing east. Remember, we talked a lot about that. But heavy rains here and here where we don't necessarily need them and up the coast, but this is desperately needed right in through here. Now what I want to do is I want to show you, this will be what some of my new mapping system will look like, and I'll make it available on AgWeather very soon. But this is just some overlays with some of the numbers. And in the next 10 days, on one of these extremely dry places here in the upper Midwest, Western Corn Belt, this region, we're looking at in the artificial intelligence model up to 2 inches plus of liquid. Now it's going to be a snow on a lot of this area, but there's 2+ inches of liquid here. A lot of it coming through the Ohio and Mississippi Valley, here as well. And if we just kind of take a look at some other regions from the lower Mississippi Valley and just a bit west of it, there's 2 to 3 inches in here. And look at this moisture coming through this area across the East Coast as well. And that's not to leave out the West. I mean, just take a look at the flow where it enters the country. From Northern California to the Sierra Nevada, we are packing in a lot with this pattern. And as it just gets delivered across the country, we're going to be watching some places really break away from where they've been for the last 60 days. And that means that this region, some serious correction happening. Correction happening here as well. This will be a spot where the eastern side of this region could see more than the western side. And I don't expect this area to overall see much of a moisture recovery. There will be some, but it's just not a major recovery of moisture. Again, the map you're looking at is the last 60 days % of normal precipitation. All right, so let's now dig into the operational models and kind of get an idea on these systems. We've already played through here, so let's pick it up where the NAM leaves off. Both models picking up where that rain snow line is going to be in parts of New York, getting into Vermont, New Hampshire. Notice the GFS has brought more wetter weather farther to the north before there's snow. We then play this system through the East Coast, and as it leaves, we now start to see the setup for the next system. Now this is Sunday at 7 a.m., getting through middle of the day Sunday into Sunday evening. And both models are bringing snow out of Montana across the Dakotas all the way to Wisconsin. That's a pretty consistent picture there, with rain in Nebraska and Iowa. And then as we work our way into early Monday morning, watch the low curl up as the upper level trough kind of reaches that inflection point and tilts negatively. And that's when the low starts to make its way straight, well, not straight north, but really, really north-northeast. See that turn? So it comes in like this. It makes a hard turn toward Lake Superior. Now that's going to be the time frame over which we're watching for the severe storms here. All right. Before that, it's going to be in the plains. It's going to transition east over to the Delta early next week. But this is where the heaviest snow is going to be. And what I'm worried about is a little triangle, maybe like right in through there, where if you just watch back and forth, we bring snow in early on this side of it, and then we bring snow in later on this side of it. We're going to take a look at just how much from the models in a second. So that low moves through, rolls right up to the Hudson Bay. Look at that good agreement in the models, 156 hours out in the forecast. And they both got the next system coming into the northwest. So that rolls through, and then we get out here to Thursday the 28th, getting into Friday the 29th. The models handle the East Coast a little differently, okay? But they both bring in another system right here over the Central Rockies and let that one come out. GFS is farther to the south, European's a bit slower farther to the north, but overall, you see it. And what's lined up behind it? Another one. So these are the next 3 to 4 systems that will be coming across the country, and doing so delivering a tremendous amount of moisture. So I left the European model out there at a 7-day snowfall forecast. And can you start to see that area that I mentioned in here? So the snow now, the snow coming soon, the heaviest snows the European model has here in the interior of New England and along the Sierra Nevada and Cascades with some of the Central Rockies. This is what the GFS has. A little different. And by the way, if you want to see what the differences look like in the models, please go to the website, agweather.com, ag-wx.com. So for example, I don't know, let's go to Minneapolis. You start typing it in, it brings you up a nice drop-down list. You click on it, it has to put the number in there. That's the identifier I use in my system to know where Minneapolis is. If you just click enter, it's not going to work. But let's submit the forecast here and click there. And once it's done, and what I want to do is I want to show you the 10-day GFS versus European model snowfall forecast. So right now, the European's going after 11.2 inches for Minneapolis. The GFS is 21.7. So you see there are differences. The timing looks good, right? They both are bringing in the precipitation at the same time, but it's the amount that's changing. So feel free to do this for any location you want. I got 30,000 locations in the database here that you can do that with. But it's just part of this new system I'm building for all of you. So that's it. I wanted you to see what the models were doing differently here in terms of snow. So we go back to the ensembles. And this is the GFS ensemble. No, that's a GFS operational. I'm sorry. Let's do GFS ensemble on this. There we go. That's GFS ensemble out a week, looking at 10-to-1 ratios, which may be a bit off in this system. We may need to adjust those down. But that is your GFS ensemble. Let's now look at the European ensemble. There it is. So a little lower back, farther to the west in the Dakotas. But overall, this is hitting that incredibly dry spot. All right. From there, let's look at the probability maps from the GFS. So this is the chance of an inch. Here's the chance at 3 inches and 6 inches. Remember, that's 90 to 100% right in through there of 6 inches. And here's a foot. So you can see how aggressive the GFS is right in through this area on a foot of snow. If we go up to 18, we're going to start talking about Western Mountains and possibly a region in through here that's got a 50% chance of 18 inches of snow. Does the European agree with that? Let's go have a quick look at it. Yeah, it's got the same spot in there. Stepping down now, here's the European model chance of a foot. And here's 6 inches. So you can see it's a little lighter back here than what the GFS was. And overall, just for 3 inches of snow, that's our main area. If we look on the dry side of this, it now identifies that part of the Canadian prairie in this western high plains region down here on the Caprock and getting into New Mexico that's drier, plus kind of the Mojave Desert region picking up less than a tenth. But on the very wet side of it, this is the probability of an inch. So look at that, over 90% chance of getting an inch of moisture out of this. Much higher down here across the south where we have good chances of at least 2 inches. And so if you kind of find 3 areas, it's here, here in the Midwest and on the West Coast, where the probability of 4 inches is relatively high, right here in this part of California. So that's it. That is what we're seeing. And just to make a point here, I want you to see that the risk of heavy snow from the 28th through the 3rd, the CPC is watching the same things I'm watching. And of course they are. They're fantastic at what they do. And so there's just I'm trying to confirm my own ideas with what they've got here. They've also got the risk for the heaviest rains from the 28th through the 3rd down here in this whole region of the lower Mississippi Valley and surrounding valleys, and then up the East Coast and also in the West. So just gives us an idea that we're going to be dealing with this pattern through the first 3, 4, 5 days of April. On the temperature side of this, let's go week 2. Sorry, week 2 first. You've got, activity just continuing. That's it. That's the main idea behind all of this. And my worry area is still showing up in the models. Okay, now on the temperature side of it, frost risk over the next 7 days. I don't think we have any surprises here based on what we've been thinking through, but let's get now to the temperature forecast. So there's that boundary. It's really nicely well defined right here. That's the snow boundary we have right now, the frontal boundary on which the snow is falling now. We then go into Friday and Saturday, working our way into Sunday. Now this is the beginning of that system coming out. Large warm sector opening. This is where our severe storm risk is going to be, right in through here. Then as we work our way into Monday, it's here. And look at the power behind that front. Wow, that is some cold air coming in. And there it is on Tuesday, getting into Wednesday of next week. Excuse me. Day 5 through 10, coldest air again. Snow feedback, it sits right on top of it. Day 10 through 15, not a whole lot of change. The model's been very, very consistent with this picture overall. So I've been thinking about when this is going to moderate, right? And just to bring you up to the speed on the same discussion, it appears that we got to get through that first week of April, work our way towards tax day before we get a full break over to mild conditions in the midsection of the United States, which is where a lot of folks I know are watching this video thinking about how planting is going to start. Again, there's a cooler feedback in the snow in the west. I mentioned that multiple times. I still think that's what you're seeing here. So what we're waiting on is to understand if the MJO doesn't linger in null space, but instead pops out into phase 4 or 5. And if that does, that's just another indicator that will open up the midsection of the country to more mild air sooner. And that's what I'll be watching for. In fact, it's not just the midsection, it's the whole country gets mild if we go back over into phase 5. And as soon as we get there, the better. All right, bigger things. I don't have any new long-range information for you other than what I just shared, like really long range. I'm still waiting on one more group to give us their forecast. That'd be the CPC. And once I get it, either tomorrow or on Monday, we'll examine all of the models again and put them into kind of contrast with one another. But so much of this is going to be based on a couple of things, like El Nino, like the PDO signal that's going on here. And just thinking about a couple of these things, I want to point something out. There's one indicator we often use called the Southern Oscillation Index, and it's a measure of the pressure difference between Tahiti and Darwin, which are over in the Pacific, and of course in Australia. We use the Southern Oscillation Index as one metric to gauge what the strength of the trade winds are, and also El Nino. And you just need to know that when it's really negative, we've got El Nino-like behavior, and we just move positive. So this is another indicator that El Nino has lost its influence on the trade winds, which will be important to the long-range forecast. Just so that you can see this, I've got historic episodes going back to 1950 of negative time periods of the Southern Oscillation and positive. So for example, like the huge El Nino of 82-83, or the 97-98, or the 15-16 is where we are right now. If we just kind of zoom in here, that is our 3 years of La Nina right there that we had before this weak El Nino started and peaked this past winter. And now we're making the transition away from that over to, another La Nina episode, more than likely. The North Pacific is going to be critical as well. We talked about this before. We are kind of coming out of, I think, a 4 to 5 year period of negative PDO. It typically lasts about that long and starts to make the transition. And what will be important is just to see how that affects the ocean temperatures in the North Pacific. So I'm just kind of setting you up for something I'm going to talk about in these longer range videos that are going to be coming out once I get that last piece of information in. So just want you to know what I'm monitoring. But what I want to finish up with is a quick global look at precipitation. There's a tropical cyclone named Megan that's still spinning here in the Northern Territory of Australia. It's going to really start to soak Queensland with a lot of precipitation. There's a stationary boundary that's really going to hit them hard. Take note of the rain coming through parts of China. India, as of late, has had some decent moisture come through. Much of Western Europe is wet, and I'm not seeing major concerns around the Black Sea area for moisture. The moisture coming into South Africa, critical given the major drought scenarios that have been going on there, but we're going to finish up with a bit on South America. And we kind of take a closer look, no change overall in the forecast. Helped by the MJO and a stalled out boundary, this region is going to really get hammered with a lot of precipitation in the next 10 days. And we have questions as to its longevity, right? It's the same narrative, no change in that narrative overall. But I do want to just back this up with the newest update from the artificial intelligence forecast system, which has really got that heavy rain in that area too. So it's just good to have another source to kind of, verify forecast with. So I'll leave you there, and we'll talk again tomorrow morning. Thanks.